Hi, I'm Ricky Frank. I'm going to show you how to use a stackable set of sifting pans to separate your enamel by grain size. Here's what I'm going to use to separate my enamel grain sizes. I've got my stackable sifting set taken apart. Each one of these has a different number. So this says 80 on it, and there's an 80 mesh screen. This one over here says 325, and there's a 325 mesh screen. So it's going to go from 60 to 80 to 100 to 150 to 200, 325, and then there's a pan here which will catch anything coming through the 325 screen. So I will stack these when I want to separate my enamel. I've also got a sifter here which I'm going to use to remove a certain part of the enamel after I've separated certain grains, and I'm going to sift that onto a piece of copper, which I have right here, and a trivet to place it on after I've sifted, and I've got a jar of transparent enamel. This is unleaded Thompson 2009. It's a flux for copper. So let's begin. I'm going to start by putting the lower number at the top. So the lower number means the holes are bigger. So I'm going to put the 60 at the top. I'll put the 80 underneath it. I'll put the 100 underneath, the 150, the 200, the 325, and let's set them up so they're laying horizontal. And there's my catching pan. Now before I put the enamel here, I'm going to put a dust mask on because the enamel is going to be going up in the air, and even though it's unleaded enamel, I don't want to be breathing glass. So I've got my jar of enamel here, and I'm going to pour some in, and I am going to shake. I'm not going to shake, I'm going to shake the pans. And as you can see, it's starting to go through the screens. And let's take a look and see what we've got. So all the enamel has gone through the 60 mesh screen. And that makes sense because the enamel that I've used is sold as 80 mesh. 80 mesh means that all the enamel should go through this 80 mesh screen, and it really hasn't. Let's see if I can keep shaking and getting it through. So it's still going through those 80 mesh holes. There may be a few bigger grains, but it doesn't look like there are many. So right here is our 100. Let's remove this one and shake it a little bit more. So what is left in this pan now? This is a 100 mesh screen. That means all the grains that went through the 80 are in here, and all the grains that are smaller than the 100 went through. So that means in here are grains that are between 80 and 100. Let's put these to the side, and let's see what we've got here. This is our 150 mesh screen, and let's remove that. And let's do a little bit more shaking. So what I have in this screen now are grains that are between 150, because anything smaller than 150 went through the screen and fell down below. And they're the ones that were smaller than 100. So in this screen, I've got grains of enamel that are between 100 and 150. What do we have here? This is my 200 mesh, and let's just keep shaking and see what I've got here. So I can also see, just by looking at it, where this looks more sugary, this is starting to look more like flour. So I can literally see the grain size differences. So what's left in this one? This is everything that's bigger than 200 because it's getting trapped on the screen, and everything that is smaller than 150. So I've got 200 to 150, I've got 150 to 100, and I've got 100 to 80. Here I've got everything smaller than 200. And I'm just going to leave this here. So this gives me some separation. I'm going to remove these and put these to the side. And I've got these. So why do I care about this? Why is this important? If I was working with opaque enamels, the grain size is going to affect the edges, and it's going to affect how fully covered a layer might be when I sift through. By edges, I mean with finer grains, I'm going to get a crisper line. But more importantly, this is a transparent enamel, which means I can see through it when it's fired. And that means that this is even more important for that. And the principle is that when I apply enamel to a metal surface, air bubbles get trapped in between the grains. When I look at those air bubbles that are trapped in my pane of glass, which has been fused on to my metal, the air bubbles look like little white bubbles. And if you can imagine looking at a clear glass of carbonated water, it doesn't look clear. It looks cloudy because you see all the bubbles. And the same thing is going to happen with the finer grains. When I have these very fine grains sifted or painted onto my surface, the whole surface area of each grain is surrounded by air, and it creates lots of bubbles. So using screens like this is especially important when you're sifting transparents. So what I want to do is get rid of these. And in the enameling world, these very, very small grains are called the fines, the finer grains. So we're going to remove that, and we've got these grains here. These are my bigger grains. These are my 150 to 100, and here's my 200 to 150. Let's take a little bit of these and put these into this sifter. These are my biggest grains, and let's see what happens when I sift. I'm getting a fairly good layer, but I'm starting to get enamel falling off the edge. And that's because the bigger grains don't have any kind of cushioning when they hit the metal, and they start to bounce off. So I want to have these big grains on here because I want to have fewer air bubbles, but it looks like I need something else, some finer grains that are going to fall through the sifter first and create a cushion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix these together. So these are now my 100 mesh grains, and my 150, and I think that probably separating these out should give me enough of a cushion where I get a nice layer. So I'm going to mix these up a little bit, and let's see what happens. See what happened as I had that come off the edge there, and I'm going to, there's actually a little hole in the sifter, so it's coming out a little bit fast. So I'm going to sift, and I get a nice even edge along the wall of the copper. So what I've seen is I can get a nice even coat with transparent enamel by removing the finest grains and just using the biggest and the medium-sized grains to create an even layer. That will reduce my air bubbles and give me the best possible clarity when I fire my transparent. I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned a little bit about how to separate your enamel grain sizes. For more info, please contact us.